Hey everybody, how are you doing? Welcome to this Facebook live stream. So you have a few people hopefully catching up with us just in a few seconds. It's Wednesday evening. It's 8 o'clock, 8 p.m. Eastern, where I'm sitting. This here is live stream for Fusion 360 for absolutely beginners. We'll kick it back a little bit. It's after 8 o'clock. It's 8 o'clock at night. I might have a beer. We got Isaac already in here. Randy is in here. Appreciate it, guys. David, awesome to see you guys. We got Bob in here. It's awesome. So, these live streams are really kick back. Ask any question that you would like. And, well, you know what? We will try to attack them in here. So, what we're going to do today is, I thought it could be fun to model up a phone stand for your cellular phone. And if you had a 3D printer, this might be more fun, maybe. I don't know. But kind of like a phone stand. You will see that this is one I found a picture of online. I didn't come up with this. It kind of like have this square opening right here. What will actually fit into, well, if you're doing it on an iPhone, into the cube. So you can plug this one into your outlet, and then you can kind of slide this holder on top of it, and you now have a place where you can either place your phone up at an angle like this so you can watch the screen, or I've also seen people who kind of like just lay it down on kind of like the table and wrap their wire around or something like that. Definitely not the most technical thing out there, but you know what? This is a really good, I think a really good exercise, you know, for kind of like modeling up if you're fairly new to Fusion. So that's what we're going to do today. Any questions you have as we are moving along here is absolutely throw them inside of the chat. I will literally stop whatever we're doing and kind of like make sure that we answer these. So if you ever follow the live streams on YouTube that I do there, I normally kind of like a little bit more going fast, and then I normally join the chat afterwards. Here, it's all about you being able to answer any questions. Kind of like, as a beginner, I'll be like, whoa, hang on a second, and we will address them. So, enough of that. I can see here Randy asked that he would like to see some live tooling without a y-axis in Fusion. Okay, that is good. Probably not what we're going to do here on the Facebook live streams, but we could definitely chit-chat. That would be more, I think, for the YouTube type style. I probably had to prep a little bit for that. One other thing that I wanted to address before I get into actually we're going to model this one up just in two seconds. I did get a question in regards to the layout of Fusion that I thought was a really good question. And it was kind of like you have these menus over here to the left, and then you have down here at the bottom. Why are they? What is the difference between the two? And if you're coming from other CAD software, you know what? You might just. I don't blame you for kind of like thinking, why are things kind of like split up? By the way, hello to James. Good to see you, man. So the way I like to look at this is that this left menu over here, it's kind of like your I don't know, head-up display or your dashboard in your car that kind of like have your information in here about the parts that you're working on, where the bottom down here is literally the history of the model being modeled up. That is all that is happening down here, is each single step as you're going through the modeling process. What happens over here is more like the dashboard on your car with some different settings. Starting out at top, telling you if this is just a single component or an assembly. In our case, we see we kind of like have kind of like, well, it looks like almost like 3 squares on top of, or 2 squares on top of each other, one next to it. And that will tell us that this is what we would call kind of like an assembly, a multi-body. And the way, when we see that, then we will be looking for components. What this iPhone looking thing is a component. But there's only one component. When I click on that, that's the iPhone. Say, well, wait a minute, what about the stand? Well, this stand is actually not a component right now. That is a body. Okay? Now, a component contains its own body. So if I click on this one here and kind of like the little arrow and spread it out, you will see that this component, this iPhone, has its own bodies. So really what happens here is that I model up this stand as a standard part. Then I created a component by right-clicking up here and say new component, and that became my iPhone, or the phone, whatever you want to call this. So that's one of the things that is shown up here. The other thing, you have some document settings here that if you click on the little, you can either click on the little arrow here, and one of the things that shows up is the units you're working in. So if you want to switch units, you can just go ahead here and click on it. You can switch to the different units in there. So that's kind of like why I'm thinking that this, to me, this is a little bit like the dashboard on your car. Named views, I actually never really have gone in here in any of my live streams, but you will see that the views that are here are the ones that is assembled up here. So if I click top, we actually go into top view. Front, you can go to front view, and so forth. And home is the same as isometric. Now, one thing you need to know about this, if I spin the model around like some obscure angle, you can actually right-click up here and create a new view. And that is now what is called a name view. What is great, if you are working on something and you're keeping on going back trying to find a specific view, you can actually create your named view. So I can call it, Lars bottom. This is kind of like the bottom of the stand. It could be the iPhone stand. So now, no matter what view I'm in, just move it around, whatever, and I click on this Lars bottom, and it takes me to that view. You can right-click on them, and you can either update them, or you can also delete them. So that's kind of like how I look at this thing here, as kind of like a display. You got your sketches. That will show you all the different sketches that was used. Now, all these sketches are also the same sketches you see down here. So if you count them, you should find the same amount of sketches down here are also up here. And you can actually kind of like turn them on and off to display them by clicking on the little light bulb. Okay, so I hope that was a good explanation on that. All right, I got my beer here. Cheers, everybody. We got WT. Good to see you. Thank you for stopping by. Minister from South Africa. Awesome. Kurt says the iPhone a potato. Yeah, whatever. James, can you share the difference between extrude and press pull? Yes, absolutely. I will do that when we get to the first. How about I do that when we get to the first press pull? How does that sound? All right. So, with all this said, let's get rid of this part here and kind of like start from scratch. So we kind of like clear the slate and we can kind of like work our way through it here. So I'm going to start a new design. We can jump back and talk about this, but I'm going to new design, so blank canvas. Couple of things I like to do, and I have actually everything is set to factory reset. So we're starting from scratch on these. Two things that I like to change. First of all, I like to move down to the grid down here, and I like to turn it off, and I like to turn off snap to grid. Okay? The other thing I like to do is I like to go over to this called the view cube, right click on it, and change orthographic to perspective with auto faces. That's the two things I do. Okay? So that is really what I normally will change from factory settings. Everything else I am running pretty much straight out of the box. We got Darren here. Glad you made it, Darren. We haven't really gotten too far. Okay, so let's start modeling up this phone stand here. And a couple of things, like I said. So first of all, we got this opening where you can kind of like, if you just came, Darren just came, this phone stand that you could 3D print if you have a 3D printer. That rectangle kind of like fits over whatever charger you have. I measured up with an iPhone or the potato. But that's kind of like what that opening right here is for. So you can kind of like put the plug in, slide this one over, and you're good to go. And the other thing that is worth to know is there's kind of like a groove the phone can sit in and lean up against the wall then. And then you could also lay it down here. I'll show you the picture that I stole this idea from. So there you can kind of like see the picture. I found this online where the phone is sitting. Okay. So I'm going to start from scratch and really say, all right, so when you start modeling things up, let's hide this iPhone for a second. I'm just going to turn it off. When you start modeling, and the way I'm moving my, by the way, the way I'm moving my mouse around, or my pad around, is I'm holding down Shift while I hold down middle mouse button. That's how we're moving around like this. Scroll the middle mouse button and we zoom in and out. So when you're starting out a new design, you know, I think it's a good idea to think about what is the most important thing, because when we start our first sketch, where should we start on this part? And I don't think that there's not a one best way to do things. I think a lot of it has to do with how your brain kind of works. But when I'm looking at this part, I'm kind of thinking that where that's going to be going into the wall, that cube that it's going to rest on, that's got to be kind of the importance to start out with. You know, you definitely wouldn't start with the channel, right? Start with something that kind of makes sense. Break it down. So we're going to start with this cube here. Go back to our new design. And always start on a face or a plane. But we don't have any faces because we don't have anything on the screen yet. So we can only start on a plane. So I'm going to start a new sketch, 2D sketch. And it doesn't really matter what face what plane you're selecting to start your first sketch on. There is no rules. Some people will say there is, but there is no rules. So I'm going to pick this plane here. And it's going to go normal too. We can see we're in the sketch dialog right here, over here to the left here. So where I'm facing right now compared to this iPhone stand is kind of like front, looking at it, right front at it here. Okay. Now, so I know I measured this cube because that's what it's kind of like going to fit around. And we're going to do this in metric. It is 26 millimeters. It's actually not a perfect square. Blame Apple for that. But I'm going to do it 26. So I'm going to go up and I'm going to create a rectangle here. And I would like to just start sketching out in space. Just sketch a rectangle out. And you can just get it out there. Now you can see that you can put your dimensions in here. So you can actually type in 26, hit tab, and it goes to the next dimension, 26. And hit enter. But if you ever by mistake just placing it like this, we can of course also get to the measuring tool by hitting D. D on the keyboard, D for dimension. So I'm going to make this one 26. Hit enter and hit 26 on this one and hit enter. Okay, we now got that kind of like that square opening here. Good to see you, Ben. Thank you for joining. Now you will see that though we put those two dimensions on, and we have these horizontal and vertical constraint. And if you're ever confused about what these are, look at them over here in the constraints. The symbols will resemble. Now the reason that it's still blue and not black is because if I get out of this, you will see that this rectangle is still floating around. So we got to nail it down to space. And the way I like to nail it down is with constraints, right? Now, so here's the origin, and this is not the most important thing in the world, I think. But we could decide to just have this square snap into like a corner or something like that. But I really like the idea of having it like right on the midpoint of the origin right there. So I'm gonna go over and hit midpoint over here, click on the lines. That will say the midpoint of the line to the origin right there. And as soon as I do that, you will see that it snaps in and it becomes black. And you'll see we get a little triangle there. So right now it's fully defined. And now it's ready to be doing something with it. Jay is asking why not type the dimensions when you're making the square rather than after. No, you're absolutely right, Jay. Do that if you can. So you can go in here and you can type 26, hit tab, 26, hit enter, and you will be the same place. I just showed it just in case. I think if you're fairly new, you have a tendency to left click, make your rectangle, left click again, and suddenly the dimensions are gone and you're like, what the heck? And then that was why I was showing that. So good eye, man. You're right on track. So this is kind of like the shape of the cube. Now, good Canadian beer. I actually don't want the shape of the cube. I want that to be an opening, right? That's gonna be a clearance on the cube. So I gotta create kind of like that wall on the outside. Now, this is just pure design, kind of like intent, but I think that I would like 5 millimeters on each side around this thing as kind of like my wall thickness. So one thing I can do is I can hit O for offset. I like shortcut keys, and I think even as you're a new guy, I think why not start out learning them from the get-go. So hit offset, and you will see the chain selection is already checked, which means when I select this edge, it will offset the whole rectangle. It will chain all the way around. Now you can choose to go either on the inside or on the outside. Now look at these numbers over here, kind of like working with it. So inside will be a plus value, outside will be a minus value. That's just kind of like how it defaults. So I'm gonna add 5 millimeters. I'm gonna type -5 to make sure that it's on the outside, and just hit enter on my keyboard. So now I kind of like got a offset rectangle from the inside one. Now let's go ahead and do a extrusion of this. Okay, now here is where I many times hit Q for press pull. Okay, now when I do hit Q for press pull, just hide the tips. You will see here it says press pull, and the question James had was, what's the difference between extrude and press pull? Well, what I'm going to do when I'm selecting, I could either select the inside, I could select the outside, I could select both. I'm just going to select the outside here. Now, as soon as I do this, you will see that the menu changes from press pull to extrude. Because the reason is, James, and I'll show you just in a second, is that the press pull command is actually a bunch of different commands within one. So when we hit Q for press pull, if it's a command that can use extrude, it will jump into extrude. So if I grab this little arrow here, I can actually start dragging out the 3D shape. So it is extrude. And again, I measured my cube length, and the cube length here is 28 millimeters. So I'm just going to type that in, 28, and hit enter. And there is our first solid body right here. Now hold down shift middle mouse button, kind of like rotate it around. Now, so just to go back to the press pull versus extrude. So we have up here, you have an extrude, and here you have the press pull command. Well, the idea is the press pull can do more than just extrude. If you're selecting a sketch, it will do an extrude. So Q and hit a sketch, it will do extrude. But if I select the face, you will see that now instead of going to extrude, it actually creates an offset face command. So now I can actually add to that thickness right there. Okay. Now, Another thing the press pull can do, if I hit Q and I select an edge, it will actually turn it into a fillet. So I hope that explains it, James, that the press pull will actually just do different things. Okay, so that's why I never really use extrude, because press pull will do it if it's an extrude command. Okay, so here is our first kind of like part here of our part here. Now you will see that there's some fillets added to this part, and fillets are of course great for you know, strength and smoothness and things like that. So to do the fillets, we can either go up here and hit the fillet command under modify, or as you can see right next to it, there's a letter. Could also just hit F on the keyboard. And then we could start adding fillets in here. And we could add fillets to, and actually you don't have to rotate the model around. See here how I'm hovering over here? You can actually select through the solids. And then we can drag it and we can add some fillets to this part here. Maybe 6 millimeters is good to this part. So I'm gonna add that to all 4 sides. Now, because like I said before, it's a strength thing, I will also add a fillet to the inside, but I'm not gonna do 6, because inside of this opening here, the cube needs to fill it. Now, you could get a radial gauge and you could actually figure out what these fillets are and size-wise. I'm not gonna bother doing that. What I will do is I would actually just add fillets, some small fillets, more like I said, just for strength. So let me hit F for fillets, or I could also hit Q and select that, just same thing. And I'm just gonna select through here so I don't have to rotate the part, and add a small fillet in here. Like I said, if I do 1 millimeters, I think that it will add enough strength and be good enough for moving along and have clearances for the cube itself. All right, David asking, when should we put fillets at sketch or after? That's a good, very, very good question, because when I sketched up that original sketch, if we go in here to the sketch, we can right click on that, right? Oh, I didn't switch my screen, sorry. All right, now I don't know when I switched it over. So we added 1 millimeter fillets, see right down there, 3 there, in here on the inside, just to add a little bit of strength to the corner and make sure there was enough clearance for the cube. So yeah, David's questions, when should you add it in the sketch? Because I could, of course, if I click down here in the sketch and hit edit sketch, I could have gone in here and added the fillet right in here on the sketch level and have added this 6 millimeters to all the corners. You know what? There is no rules, okay? My practice, and you know, I mean, you know, who am I to say, right? Sitting here drinking beer. This is when I will do it. If you are sketching something up and you have to have a radius or fillet in there, and you know that will never be questioned if it has to change. I always joke around that I don't think I've ever modeled something up where at some point the customer didn't come back and say, hey, we got to make some changes. But if I knew that radius is not going to change, it's going to have to be that, and I don't want anybody who later on is getting my CAD model to work with it, it could be the customer themselves, I don't really want anybody to have to dig down and play with it, then I will put it in the sketch level if I know that it will not change. But if I know that there could be a chance, in this case here, we 3D print out this holder, and the customer holds it in their hand and they're like, I really wish that these fillets was a little bit bigger. Then I would for sure have them as a feature and not down in the sketch. Because that would be easier. Standing right in front of the customer, you could go in and make the changes right there. I actually have in the past also used the parameters for things like that. So in here in the parameters, you can create one that is called fillets, and then you could just change it right on the go with the customer looking at you. So that's really my kind of rule for that. So Theomir, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce your name. I'm sorry, buddy. 2:25 a.m. What the heck are you doing at this hour watching me? Yes, I will upload this live stream to YouTube also. It will also be here on Facebook afterwards on my Facebook page. So you'll find it both places. Yep. So, dude, go back to sleep, man. Okay, so I kind of created this cube here. I'm going to leave that with this. And now I want to kind of like pay attention to the top shelf area here. So the top shelf kind of like does two things if you just entered. One thing is you can kind of like have your iPhone or your phone. I'm keeping on saying iPhone just because I have one. Leaning up against the wall right here, or you could also just, of course, just lay it flat on here just to rest. You come home, you just throw it in there and for charging, and you just lay it flat, of course. So we're gonna kind of like concentrating on that. Now, on our model, let me go back to the origin. So we placed the origin kind of like in here. I kind of like placed it in there, what I'm perfectly happy with. Now, when I create the flat area, I'm going to sketch on this face, right? So I talked about before, we didn't have anywhere we didn't have any faces to draw on, so we drew on a plane, but now I will definitely select this face. So I'm going to go over here and create a new sketch, and I'm going to select that top face, and it's going to kind of like move over here. I'm just going to zoom out, scrolling the middle mouse button. And I'm going to do another rectangle right here. And all right, there you go, TJ. That's better. You know, I'm sorry. I'm just going to place another rectangle here. And again, many times I'll just sketch something out in space here. Now, of course, to Jay's comment before, we have the dimensions here. We can type them right in. So we can do that right here. Now, how big should this table be? That is an absolute preference. I'm not going to type them in right now because I'm going to have to get over to my webcam. Sorry about that. That is, of course, a preference. How big do you want to make that table? What I did was I measured my phone, and I decided that, you know what, I think I want it to be about 10 millimeters long on each end. I don't really want it to kind of like hang over. I'm thinking that if you're throwing it down flat on that shelf, that it's probably going to lay somewhat against the wall. So I'm just going to add another 10 millimeters on the outside. Okay? That's kind of like what I was thinking. So now where I placed it, I'm going to have to do the dimensions. So an iPhone, if you didn't know it, D for dimension. Whoops, get out of the rectangle here. D for dimension is 140 inches long. So I'm typing 140. You can actually do math in here. So I want to add 10 millimeters on each side, so plus 20. So you can actually type math right in there. And the width of an iPhone is 70. And then, like I said, I wanted to add another 10 millimeters on the other kind of side there. So I'm going to make it, I'm going to do that in my head, 80. There you go. Okay, now again, just like before, this rectangle kind of like floats around. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to select my midpoint constraint, select this line, and to the origin right there, and that has then been kind of like laid in just like this here. Okay, now from this point we can go ahead and we can extrude or press pull. We actually don't even have to get out of the sketch. If I hit Q right now, like this, and then we can hit press pull. Now notice that when I select the area, it actually, the software is smart enough to know where the intersection lines are. So if I just select here, it actually don't select over on top. Which means if I just start dragging up here, you will see we kind of like get an opening over here. So be aware whenever you're selecting, of course it's going to remember, when you make sure when you're selecting that you make sure you select both areas here, and we can move it up here. And I'm going to make this I'm going to keep the consistency of 10 millimeters. You might want to make this a little bit thinner maybe. And I'm going to hit OK to that. Now, I did this on purpose before just to show you. I'm going to hold down Shift and drag my mouse around. See, when I did this, you will see that the software will actually merge the two surfaces. But these fillets here are really not great at this area. So this happens to me many times. I'm kind of like, in my way of thinking, I kind of like thinking piece by piece. And now I'm coming to realize that these fillets in here are really not what I want. What I want is more to what you see on the one here, where I kind of like have a fillet on the outside, right? So the fillet is kind of like adding strength, where this is adding, you know, a breaking point right here. So one of the things that is important to know is that we can actually go back here, right, to this history tree down here. We can find that fillet, what is this one here, and we can at any point right click and hit edit. Now, one thing that is important to know, when you do that, you're actually kind of like suppressing whatever happened prior. You will see that the top went away. Now, I wish I could just unselect the two. I already did, but I can't. So I'm just going to hit the X to unselect and just select these two bottom edges here to make those 6 like that. And when I hit enter, you will see we're back here, and now we have kind of like eliminated those top ones. And then I'm just going to add another fillet again. Add a fillet, and I can now select, and I decided to just select 3 edges. So select this edge, spin around, hold down Shift middle mouse button, and select this one. And then we can find out, I don't know how, I can't remember how big I made it. Maybe 3. Huh, looks pretty good there. Okay, so we're almost there. That looks pretty good. All right. David is talking about be better with a slice and push pull. I'm not quite sure what you're referring to, David. Might need a little bit more explanation on that. Okay, so this is done, and we actually right now we're probably halfway there compared to the original one we're going for. At least we have a place we can put our phone down on this little charger here. If you just joined, you can see David just joined. That this is a charger where you can put your little view, your cube in here for your charger. Let me see if I can call up that picture again. So you can plug in your phone, and you have like a little cute charger here. That's what we are kind of like working on in this session. So I hope that is useful to you, David. So the next thing I want to work on is this curve area here. So it's kind of like I have the slot to fit within. Again, this is really just preference, but what I decided to do was that I wanted kind of like an arc, and now we got to find a place to sketch that arc. So I'm going to select this face. So again, when we started out before, the first sketch we used was on a plane. The next one we did to create the shelf area was on a face, and now I'm selecting another face to kind of like create that arc for the phone to rest in. Hey Anthony, thank you for joining. So to do that, I'm going to open another sketch. So I'm kind of like repeating what you've already seen me do. And click on here, and I'm going to click on the side face right here. And just like we can do the rectangles up here, we have different types of tools if you hit the drop down. I always recommend people, you know, I know when we're trying to model and we always want to get something on the screen quick. But if you have a little bit of time, it's a good idea to kind of like go in here and just spend 30 seconds and just look at some of the different things that is in here. Maybe try to play with them. My favorite arc is the 3-point arc. It didn't used to be like that, to be honest. But as soon as you know what are the 3 points you select, in what order, then you're all good. So I'm going to click on 3-point arc, And the way the 3-point arc work is you're selecting the 2 endpoints, and then you're selecting the 3rd point. So I'm just gonna make sure it snaps to this top end here. Left click once, select my 2nd endpoint, left click twice, and then you will see that this arc appears. And I'm just gonna place the last one down somewhere around here, doesn't really matter. Now, you'll see my cursor is still have the arc tool next to it. I'm gonna hit escape on my keyboard to get out of that. Of course, it's all blue, so we can move it around. Now we kind of like gotta define it with the right dimensions here. All right, we can see that, I can see we got a couple of questions here, or comments at least. So Bob says, you could have made the shelf with the first sketch if you extruded 2 different bodies. Is this a good idea, having more than one body created from a single sketch? That's a great question, Bob. You know what? No, I think that you are absolutely cool. If you know, why should you have multiple sketches if you can pack everything into one sketch? Why not? The only reason I would say not to do that is your sketches could, not with this part, but your sketches could get very complex if you cram everything into just one sketch. But it's not bad practice. Now, if you're starting out and you're brand new, but again, these live streams on this Facebook at night, that's what I'm intending this for. I like to kind of break things down into segments. So I'm thinking like, okay, at first I have like that bottom piece for the view cube, right? And then the table is kind of like a next step. So I like to break the sketches down like that. But no, I mean, to me, in my mind, you're kind of like a little bit on the next level advanced. So good, you're awesome. I would say I did a YouTube video on doing a plastic injection mold, and there I used like one main sketch and extruded out of that. So you're right on. Okay. Belen, why an arc could also be a circle, and you cut the whole cylinder all the way through, right? Yeah, so you could have drawn, you're right. This didn't, I'm only gonna cut that half shape right there and add a couple of fillers to it. An arc that's an arc, right? But yes, you could absolutely have hit C for circle and sketch that out there. Absolutely. Yep. Nothing wrong with that. I don't think there was anything that I could tell you that would be bad with that. All right. So Curtis making a comment, I think, to David. I might just have missed that one. I'm sorry. All right. So, one question Bob has. So I'm sorry, Kurt, if I think you got it. Bob says, if you rotate your sketch, how do you get back to looking at it straight forward? Normally when I'm working, honestly, I just hit up here on the view cube. That's kind of like my default. But trust me, I don't always do all the right things. If you ever follow me on my YouTube live streams, you'll know that. One thing you can do down here, there is a button down here called Look At. So if I click on Look At, and I click on that face where that sketch is, then it will go normal too. But it is actually also a setting in your preferences, I believe. I think there's a setting in here. Now I might just dig deep. Auto look at a sketch. So this one here means that when you're starting a sketch, you click on a face, it will go and look right straight at that. So you can turn that off if you don't want it. Okay, we're gonna place some dimensions on this. Again, this is kind of like just in my head. I decided D for dimension. I decided that I wanted this one here to be 15 wide, just because that looks pretty good to me. And I wanted it, again, 10 millimeters from the edge. Not for any specific reason, just I thought I would stick with the 10. We have 10 thickness. And then I'm gonna decide that I wanna control how deep that slot is by making a dimension from the center of that circle, that arc, sorry, to the edge. And I figured out that 1 looked like a pretty good groove. we see everything here is all black, and we're all good. Now I'm gonna do what I did before, Q for press pull. Wow, I only had a half a beer and I'm already questioning myself. And selecting this half moon shape here. Now if I pull straight out, it's going to be an extrude out. If we go in, it's going to be that cut I want. I prefer, so you could just drag it out, like I think many people just do that. Just drag the arrow out like this, and then you know, hit OK. I prefer to go down here and click all, so it's going to go through any bodies that it sees, which kind of like trims it to here. The reason for that is that if we do a distance and we just decide, like many people just drag the arrow out, something like that, so now it's hanging out here with a distance, and we hit OK, it still get what we want. But if we at some point decided we were talking to the customer and they decided they were going to do it for one of those cool Samsung phones that are a lot bigger, if we go back in and edit that original sketch, right click and hit edit, and we decided that we were going to make this one, you know, right now it is 160, but what happened if we wanted to make it really big? 220, right? Exit out of the sketch. Now you will see that that cut would not go all the way through, and now you would have to go back in again, hit edit, and then drag the arrow out more. If you do all, then it's just going to do whatever this one is, right? So now it doesn't really matter if it gets longer or if it gets shorter. That cut will always go all the way through. So that's why I do that. In case you were wondering. Okay, so we did 160, right? Okay, we're almost done here, guys. Now, I did this, and you know, one of the things that's great about being a designer in a CAD software is that you can look at things and be like, you know, I really don't like how the thickness right here, let me look normal too. I don't like how we suddenly are losing a lot of thickness right here. I would like to have that same kind of strength on here. So what we could do was we could create another feature. So down here we have all these different features, right? So I'm gonna just right click on that face, create a new sketch, right? And then we could use the tool we've already used once, offset, O for offset. Select this. Now, here's an interesting thing. I talked about before that we had chain selection on. Now, if I select this, it's going to chain select the whole thing. This case, that was what I wanted the first time. Now, I don't want it. So I'm going to uncheck chain selection, and then it will only select that edge that I'm selecting. And I can now offset this edge out here. Now, I wanted to keep it the same thickness as we had over here, so that would be 10. So I'm just going to type that out here. Hit enter, and notice how the color in here are different than it is out here. That means that this is actually ready to be extruded. So I can literally hit Q again. Now notice how it didn't rotate this time. Sometimes it does not rotate. I'm going to hold down Shift, middle mouse button, and I'm going to select that bottom edge, and I'm going to drag that out to kind of like give it that thickness going up right here. Now, I was talking before that I like to do through all, but since we're adding, we can actually not do through all. It actually doesn't really work that way, but we can do to object, and if we now select in this face, we're kind of like doing the same kind of thing. And then you have these chain faces down here. They can be a little bit tricky which one you should select. Okay, hit that, and now we kind of like assured that we kind of gotten that same thickness going down here for the groove. The last thing I'm really only going to do to this part is to add some fillets, just to kind of like make sure that we don't, cut ourselves and make it look a little bit smooth. Probably break it down. Like I think if you're looking at my original one here, you will see that I kind of like broke it down into some kind of like some different steps, some different sizes. So let's hit F for fillet and place one on the inside here. And I can't remember how big I made them. You could always change those. I round them up to 3 in there. And then I probably also hit another fillet, and I probably make sure that I had a nice fillet to the outside rounds here, right? And you can kind of like, I like to use the handle and just kind of like dragging it in. That kind of like gives me a little bit of a view of, about how big I want to make them. Let's make it 4. Okay, so now we got that there. You could also maybe add a small fillet on the inside here if you wanted to. But you know what? The last thing I'm gonna do to this one, David, we don't want any blood. No, nobody can cut yourself in this. You actually maybe also, I don't know if I would do this in a normal model like this, adding a little chamfer to it. It might just be a little fillet going around it. I'll leave it for here. The last thing I'm going to do to this one here is I am going to change the color of it. So in Fusion, the default color you're looking at is not gray. The default color is actually steel. And you can actually do that by, if you right click up here on the part up here and you go in and click physical material, you will see that there is actually a physical material. Now this physical material is used for, like, if you're doing simulation studies or so forth. In here you'll see there's a lot of different ones in there, but you'll see that it defaults to steel, and that's also what we see if we right click and select appearances. You will see that it is steel. So what I probably would do is you maybe will go with plastic. You can select different types in here. I did mine red, whatever. You can drag that right, either drag it out on the part, or you can drag it right up here and overwrite all the ones out there. And then you kind of like have end up with your iPhone or Samsung or whatever smartphone type of holder you have here. Now you should probably save it, right? Hit save and save it whatever directory that you would like to save it in. Give it a name. We call it a phone holder, maybe phone stand. Let's call it a phone stand, and save it. And if you were going to, I'm not going to get into 3D printing, but this would be a nice part to 3D print, right? And actually email me, and I'll be happy to share this model with you. If I think you should try to model up yourself, then you could completely customize it, but I'll share mine. You do have the make button over here. You could go into 3D print it, select what it is you want. I normally like to use Mesh Mixer. That is my preferred printer utility, but that will kind of like break it down and take you out to, if you do want to 3D print this little holder. Bob asked, how did I select the baguettes of the corner fillet? Yeah, so that is one of the things. For years, I did. Let me go back here to this one here. Let's go ahead and edit it and kill it for a second. So for years, whenever I was doing fillets or chamfers, I would select the edges that I could see, and then I would spin around to try to find that back edge, until I realized that inside of Fusion, it's actually smart enough, if it's inside of a fillet or a chamfer, it's actually smart enough to know to look through. You see how when I'm hovering over where that edge would actually be, I can select it right there. It's like one of those small lazy mans, I prefer those. I think it was 6. Cool. All right. It is 8:50. Now, I really appreciate, we got 24 people in here. I really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your busy day to join these live streams here. This is the third one that we have done on Facebook. Really just trying to, make them a little bit casual. Any questions you have, throw them in there in the comment area, and I'll do my best to answer them. This is really just my attempt to add a little bit more value to your Fusion 360 experience. Nothing else, just that. I want to keep these Facebooks. They're Wednesday evening, 7 p.m., 8 p.m. Eastern. Almost blew it there. I want to keep them as beginner level. So, I don't blame anybody for being a little bit confused when you're trying to learn a new CAD system. I still am from time to time. So this is the place where you can ask any questions when it comes to Fusion. There's no silly ones like that. All right, guys, I'll end it here. If you have anything, my email address, lars.christensen@autodesk.com. It's kind of overflowing right now. So if you get a pushback from me, I'm sorry, but I'm always trying to answer as many as I can after work hours. That's about it. Man, you guys are the best. Thank you so much. Have an awesome evening, and hope to see you soon again. Thank you, guys.